Good evening, ladies, and whoever else wandered in here tonight. Before we begin, I want to ask you a question. What do attraction, loneliness, Gothic literature, vampire stories, occult symbolism, desire, intimacy, ritual, fantasy, and human relationships all have in common? At first glance, absolutely nothing. One belongs to psychology, one belongs to literature, one belongs to spirituality, one belongs to mythology, one belongs to sexuality, and one belongs to philosophy. And yet, the older I get, the more convinced I become they are all exploring the same mystery from different directions. Human beings are strange creatures. We crave intimacy while simultaneously fearing what intimacy demands from us. We long to be understood while hiding the parts of ourselves we most want someone else to see. We seek freedom, yet willingly surrender ourselves to relationships, beliefs, identities, fantasies, communities, and stories. We are drawn toward mystery, drawn toward beauty, drawn toward danger, and drawn toward transformation. For thousands of years, we've been telling stories about those things, stories about love, stories about temptation, stories about monsters, stories about heroes, stories about hidden knowledge, and stories about power, stories about the parts of ourselves we rarely examine directly. This channel exists because I find those questions fascinating, not because I claim to have all the answers. I don't. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a relationship guru. I'm simply a man who has spent most of his life observing people and wondering why human beings do the things they do, why we fall in love, why we become lonely, why we become obsessed, why fantasies sometimes feel safer than reality, why intimacy can be both comforting and terrifying at the same time. This video will be longer than most. It's meant to introduce the channel, introduce the ideas we'll be exploring together, and explain why I became fascinated with these subjects in the first place. So pour yourself a drink, dim the lights, and get comfortable. Tonight is the beginning of a very long journey. Let me take an aside here, just to let you know. Um, it's been a long time since I put out I guess about a week since I put out the last video. What I've done is I've written this episode and I've got 28 other episodes written. I've been preparing everything. So from now on, they'll be coming out quicker so that there isn't as much time between them. I've been trying to start this channel for a long time. It's not only about relationships, it's about the strange collection of subjects that have followed me throughout my life: attraction, psychology, fantasy, Gothic literature, the occult, loneliness, intimacy, and emotional performance, and the strange emotional theater human beings continually create around each other. My biggest problem is I've never been a performer. I mean, I've been in plays and stuff. I know what's expected there, but this YouTube stuff is kind of baffling to me. The algorithms and all that stuff. I just want to do what I want to do. Uh, when I first started, I was doing I had jewelry videos of my jewelry making. I'll probably make some videos on my leather work, making Gothic collars and chokers and things like that. But mostly it's going to be about this exploration of the human psyche. And maybe that's why I'm finding the right tone for the first time, because, those are my real interests, the psychology of humanity. I've been part of the Gothic culture since the 1980s, but what drew me to Gothic culture was never the aesthetic only, it was the atmosphere. It was the emotional honesty hidden underneath the darkness. It was the rebellion against the norm, because, back in the 80s when goth started, we were looked at as weirdos. We wore black. We were into horror and the dark side of life, and it was a new thing then. Gothic culture also looks at the fascination with beauty, longing, morality, desire, loneliness, mystery, fantasy, and the hidden parts of human psychology that most people spend their lives trying not to examine directly. I'm also an occultist, although probably not in the way most people imagine when they hear the word. The occult is not merely about demons, forbidden books, dark aesthetics, or shock value. Most of the occult is simply the study of hidden knowledge, symbolism, philosophy, psychology, spirituality, mythology, and archetypes. The search for deeper patterns quietly operating underneath ordinary life. Unfortunately, spectacle is easier to market than reflection, so spectacle often dominates the conversation. But this channel isn't really about spectacle. It's about understanding people. And honestly, I've discovered something while trying to start this project. People don't like it when I use AI voices, but I understand why. Human beings are remarkably sensitive to authenticity, even when they cannot explain why something feels artificial. So moving forward, I'll be reading everything myself. I have slight aphasia, which means my speech isn't always as smooth as I would like it to be, but perhaps imperfection is more human than perfection anyway. We'll find out together. Now, somewhere in the middle of all these interests lies the real reason this channel exists, understanding why human beings are simultaneously drawn toward intimacy and terrified by it, why we seek connection, why we fear vulnerability, and why we become attached, why we project, why we idealize, why we create fantasies, and why we long for meaning, and why much of human behavior seems to orbit forces we rarely examine directly. Part of this channel will involve attraction and relationship psychology. Part of it will involve Gothic literature. Part of it will involve symbolism, mythology, and occult philosophy. Part of it will involve identity, shadow, personal transformation, and the stories human beings tell themselves. But if I had to reduce it to a single question, it would probably be this: why do human beings spend so much time of their lives searching for connection while simultaneously fearing what connection requires? The question has fascinated me for decades. The older I get, the more convinced I become that many of our modern problems resolve around that contradiction. People want intimacy, but intimacy demands vulnerability. People want love, but love demands risk. People want to be known, but being known allows another person to see the things we normally hide. And because of that, many people spend their lives caught between two competing desires: the desire for connection and the desire for protection. I think this becomes especially visible in our modern relationships. One of the things I've observed over the years is that many people approach attraction as though attraction is the goal, as though the objective is simply to become desirable, to attract attention, to generate interest, to create chemistry. But attraction is actually the easy part. Maintaining a meaningful relationship is much harder. Sexual attraction can happen in minutes. Emotional trust can take years. And one of the most painful lessons many people eventually learn is that being desired and being deeply known are not the same thing. Sexual attention can be found almost anywhere. Human history proves that. Why do you think prostitution has existed for thousands of years? Sex itself is rarely the difficult thing to find. The difficult thing is finding someone who genuinely understands you, someone who respects you, someone who sees who you are beneath the performance, someone who remains when the excitement fades and ordinary life begins passing inward from every direction. Anyone can satisfy desire temporarily. A satisfying relationship is much rarer. One of the things I think people misunderstand about attraction is that attraction changes as we age. When we're younger, We often become fascinated by beauty, chemistry, excitement, fantasy, possibility, and those things certainly matter. But over time, many people discover something unexpected. Peace becomes attractive. Stability becomes attractive. Emotional safety becomes attractive. Being able to stop performing becomes attractive. And I don't think many people fully appreciate how exhausting performance can become, particularly for men. Men spend their lives feeling as though they must constantly project strength, confidence, competence, certainty, financial stability, sexual capability, and emotional control. Because of that, a woman who creates emotional peace instead of emotional pressure can become profoundly attractive in ways many people do not fully understand. I also think many men fear intimacy more than they openly admit, not because they don't want closeness, but because intimacy eventually strips away the performance. Eventually, another person sees the uncertainty, the insecurity, the fear, the exhaustion, the doubts hiding beneath the image. Fantasy often feels safer than vulnerability. Pursuit feels safer than attachment. Desire feels safer than exposure. And because of that, many people spend years chasing attraction while avoiding intimacy. Yet, real intimacy is not supposed to feel like performance forever. In a healthy relationship, emotional safety gradually replaces constant self protection. People stop managing every word, stop performing every moment, stop trying so hard to appear perfect. And ironically, honesty often creates deeper attraction than performance ever could. At some point, most people stop wanting to feel like somebody's fantasy and begin wanting to feel like somebody's person. And maybe that's one of the great contradictions in modern life. We have endless access to stimulation, endless access to entertainment, endless access to fantasy, endless access to attention. Yet many people seem lonelier than ever. Perhaps because attention is not intimacy, fantasy is not emotional safety, and stimulation is not love. And that realization eventually led me toward another question. Why are human beings attracted not only to people, but to ideas, to symbols, to stories, to myths, to rituals, to mysteries, to hidden knowledge? Because attraction rarely exists in isolation. Human beings are attracted to experiences that feel meaningful, experiences that feel transformative, experiences that feel larger than ordinary life. And that observation eventually led me towards subjects like mythology, symbolism, ritual, and the occult. Not because I was searching for supernatural answers, but because I became fascinated with the human search for meaning itself. Why do people seek hidden knowledge? Why do they seek transformation? Why do they create rituals? Why do they surround themselves with symbols? Why are they drawn toward mystery? Those questions are not merely spiritual questions, they are psychological questions. And they are the questions we'll be exploring throughout this channel. But before we can begin that journey, there's one final subject we need to discuss: Gothic literature. Because Gothic literature is often misunderstood. Many people hear the word Gothic and immediately think of vampires, ghosts, haunted castles, graveyards, dark forests, ruined cathedrals, and things that go bump in the night. Certainly, Gothic literature contains all those things, but those things are not why Gothic stories have survived for centuries. The real reason Gothic literature survives is because it explores subjects that never stop being relevant: desire, fear, loneliness, identity, power, temptation, mortality, and transformation. The clothing changes, the technology changes, The language changes. Human nature does not. And because human nature does not change nearly as much as we often imagine, Gothic literature continues speaking to readers generation after generation. At its heart, Gothic literature is not only about monsters, it's about human beings confronting parts of themselves they do not fully understand. The outsider, the stranger, the forbidden, the hidden room, the secret, the double, the haunted past, the conflict between reason and emotion. Again and again, Gothic stories return to these themes because human beings continue struggling with them. The monster often represents fears and desires and impulses society teaches us to suppress. The hidden room represents parts of ourselves we keep locked away. The stranger represents the unknown, and the haunted past reminds us that history rarely stays buried forever. And perhaps that's why I find Gothic literature so fascinating, because Gothic literature understands something modern culture often forgets. Human beings are not purely rational creatures. We are emotional creatures, symbolic creatures, psychological creatures. We tell ourselves stories because stories allow us to explore truths that are difficult to approach directly. And over the coming months, that's exactly what we'll be doing. We'll be exploring stories, exploring symbols, exploring attraction, exploring identity, exploring shadow, exploring transformation, and exploring the strange psychological territory where all of these subjects intersect. Over the next several episodes, we'll begin building the foundation. We'll explore attraction, identity, shadow, transformation, meaning, fantasy, and the stories human beings tell themselves. Only then will we begin moving into some of the classic Gothic works that inspired this channel in the first place. Because before we can understand the monsters, we need to understand the human beings that created them. Before we can understand the stories, we need to understand the psychology underneath them. Before we can understand the symbols, we need to understand ourselves. And that's where we'll begin next time. Anyway, welcome to the channel.